read 8 books in the month of December, so let's talk about all of them. In no particular order, we are going to start with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I listened to this as an audiobook, so there is actually no video of me reading this book, but I sobbed. I absolutely love this book so much that that's why I had to buy it, and I got the deluxe edition as well. Like, look how beautiful she is, and like, when you open it up. This book, oh my goodness. I think about this book constantly. This is like a 20,000 star read. This is one of my favorite books that I've ever read. It's so heartbreaking and beautiful and captivating, and it feels so real too. Like, you really do feel like Evelyn Hugo is a person and is a real person who did all of this stuff. And I have so many feelings about this book. I'm never gonna recover. It's and the ending of this book. So the premise of this book is basically about Evelyn Hugo, who is like, kind of think like the Madonna of the times, and she was this really, really famous movie star. And so the story follows basically this journalist who ends up being able to have the opportunity to interview Evelyn Hugo, who's now like in her 70s or 80s, I believe it was, and she gets to tell her story. And so we get that story told from Evelyn about her 7 husbands, what it took for her to become pretty much nothing to everything, and the struggle of a woman who loved another woman in the like 40s or whatever timeline that it was, like, and how hard it was, and like the love and the relationships, and like how hard it was to do everything, and just everything about it is so beautiful, and it's tragic and amazing, and I love it so much, and I love it so much. Go read this book, please. And of course, being Christmas time, I did read a couple of Christmas books. I read The Christmas Fix by Lucy Score. This one, I think I gave it a 3.5 because it was okay. It wasn't like the best thing I've ever read, but it was enjoyable enough. And it's basically about a woman named Catalina Quinn. She's like a reality TV star, and her job is basically rebuilding destroyed homes for people. And so in this book, there's this town that gets hit with this really bad hurricane, and it's one of those towns that's like really, really reliant on the funds that come in Christmas through like tourists and stuff. And so she has some friends there, and so she really wants to fix this town, but then he's not the mayor, I always forget his title, but he's pretty much like one of the guys in charge of this town, and his name is Noah. And he basically does not want Kat to do this because he thinks that she's trying to like profit off of tragedy, but in reality, she really just wants to help these people. And so there's a lot of like bickering back and forth between these characters. There's a lot of attraction and stuff. And of course, it is a romance book. So it's an enemies to lovers romance book that takes place in like a Christmas town during Christmas time. Yeah, it was okay. I enjoyed it. It was good for the holidays. I also read Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. This is the biggest book I've ever read in my life. It was really, really good. This was obviously 5 stars. Everything in the Stormlight Archive series has been incredible. This book in particular finishes the first arc of the series. So it's going to be a series of 10 books, and this is the 5th book. So the first arc, the last like 200 pages of this book literally had me screaming. I was sweating. I was like doing that thing where you're reading and you stand up and you're like, what? Like that kind of stuff. I had all of the emotions with this book. 5 stars for sure. Waited so long to read this book, and then now we have to wait like another like 10 years for the next book. Like by the time this series is over, I'm gonna be ready to retire. Like, I'm not even joking. That's the way it's gonna be. But this book was so fun and so good. If you like high fantasy with a really great multicast, really cool system. I love the magic system in this book. I love the technology of this book. It's really good. I can't say too much if you haven't read it because then it's like major spoilers, but I do have a video all about me reading this book, and then I'm also working on a video where I'll be talking about all the spoilers from this book as well, and my theories for what the rest of the series is going to be like. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, if you haven't read the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson, this is your sign to read that series, please. It's incredible. You will not regret it. This book hurts. This cover hurts. Next up, we have Meghan Quinn's How My Neighbors Stole Christmas. And I think this was probably one of my favorite Christmas reads that I read. I think I gave it a 4.5 stars. And it was so silly and goofy. It did not take itself seriously. And that is what I really loved about it. It was like a really, really silly but spicy Hallmark movie is the best way to put it. There's a lot of making fun of itself, knowing what it wants to be. This is a book, I think this is what I loved about it, is that this is a book that knows what it wants to be. It knows that it finds the line between being so silly, but not silly enough that you want to like not read it, if that makes any sense. And it's really fun because it's this, our main character is named Storyteller, and she and her sister end up having to go back to their old hometown to help their like great aunt because she fell and broke her hip. And so Story hasn't been back here in a long time. She hasn't celebrated Christmas in a really long time either. And so it's not ideal for her, but here she is. And her great aunt really wants to win this like Christmas competition, and it means a lot to her. And so she basically forces Story to participate, and Story did not have the best time right before she left this town. Like, she accidentally knocked over an old lady and she fell into a lake and stuff. The lady's fine. And she was just like really embarrassed, and she never really like, she kind of like detached herself away from Christmas. And so that's kind of her part of the story. And then on the flip side, we have the love interest who is our rival. It's an enemies to lovers, but it also has fake data. And his name is Cole. And he's, think when you watch those Hallmark, those Netflix movies, and you have the man who wears plaid and he has a Christmas tree farm. That's this guy. He is that guy. And he and Story used to be like acquaintances, kind of like friends as well. Like whenever she would come and visit, they would hang out on his porch and stuff, but they haven't talked in a very long time. And so she is now in town, and he's like, she doesn't deserve this, because the last conversation they had, she was talking about how much she hated the town, it's the worst thing ever, without realizing that Cole had just lost his parents that day, and that the town had kind of come together to help take care of him and make sure he had everything. So that didn't sit right with him, and so he doesn't think that she deserves to be the #1 Christmas person, the title that they give to people. And so he also enters this Christmas competition. There's a bunch of stuff that they do. There's like candy cane making, stocking, like sewing, the best Christmas lights and stuff. And so they're working against each other. There's some sabotaging, there's some romance, there's some real good spice in this book, completely unexpected. If you've heard about the infamous candy cane scene, that is in this book. This is the candy cane scene book, and it's just so fun. I had a really good time with this book. Some people don't like it, it's probably too goofy, but for me, this was the perfect amount of goof. I loved it. I would probably read this again next Christmas. Next up, we have Phantasma by Kaylie Smith. And this book, I think I gave it a 4.5. That sounds about right. I read this book so fast. This is such a binge-worthy book, which I understand the hype for it. And it's fun. It's got like gothic vibes. It's like dark, it's romancy, and it's really fun. I really do think it is just like a darker, more mature version of Caraval by Stephanie Garber, but with its own kind of fun spin and twist on it as well. It's got some really good OCD representation as well, which I really appreciated as somebody who does have that. And yeah, it was fun. The only thing is that I found the ending really rushed. So like this could have been a 5-star read for me, but there were two things that kind of knocked it off. The first was, like I mentioned, the ending felt very rushed. It was just like, the pacing was amazing. This book has one of the best openings I have ever read. It was so good. It lives rent-free in my mind. Incredible. And so with this book, everything was incredible up until the way that it concluded. And I was like, what? That's it? Like, that's how you're gonna end it? Like, it's just so quick and out of the blue. So the ending wasn't the best, and I didn't really get behind the romance between our two kind of like protagonists. I didn't feel the chemistry. They didn't really have any chemistry. They just kind of liked each other for the sake of like plot device. So that was the two reasons why I did not give it 5 stars. However, this was a very fun book. We have our main character, Ophelia. And so the book has, like I mentioned, has the coolest opening ever. And she's a necromancer, and she's a family of necromancers. And so she ends up going into Phantasma because her sister Genevieve is trying to help. And she's trying to help by winning so she can get some money, because their house is gonna basically get taken from them. And so Genevieve goes in there. And so Ophelia goes after her, and she has to go through all of these different trials, and some of them are themed after the 7 deadly sins. There's a lot of references to like the 9 circles of hell and like all of this. There's these devils everywhere, and there's a lot of bargains, and people participate in this, and whoever wins basically gets one wish. And so the stakes are obviously high. Like, you can literally die in the games, you have to kill people in the games, but you can also make a bargain with the devil, and or you can just forfeit if you do not want to play. So there's like a scene where someone's about to get like cut in half with a saw or something, and it's like, okay, well, I forfeit, and so boop, gone, life saved. But other characters, they don't, and they just die. And so it is very intense, it is very gory at times, and it has such a fun gothic vibe. It's honestly, I should have read this in October. It is such a Halloween book. But yeah, definitely enjoyed this. If you like the trials and the high stakes and all of that, it's definitely good. There is romance, which is nice. The spice is very, very yummy and very well done. I couldn't get behind the chemistry, but overall, very nice book, 4.5 stars. I'm excited to read the next one. Another book that I don't actually physically own, I just downloaded it as an EPUB, and that was You're Not Crazy, You're Grieving, which is a self-help book by Alan D. Wolfelt, PhD, and it's honestly really good. It's a very short book. It outlines the 6 steps to kind of like help with grief and stuff. So if you're kind of looking for, I know it's so different than my usual stuff. I'm definitely a fiction reader, but in this case, I did read a nonfiction book. I know it's very rare, but yeah, if you are currently going through like grief and loss and all that stuff, honestly, I recommend it. I would give it 5 stars. It was really good. I'm using the strategies. Yeah, it was definitely a good book. And I think what was really great about the book as well is that the writing is very compassionate. It's very friendly. It's very easy to read and go through. It has a lot of good, just kind of like bullet points in it. And most importantly, and what's really important for me as well, is that it's good for people who are not religious. And it is also good for people who are religious, because it kind of divides it into 2 different categories where it's like, if you're religious, these steps may apply to you. If you're not, these steps may apply to you. And it's just like really open for all types of people from all walks of life. So yeah, I definitely think that that was a good book. I'm really happy that I read it during this time, as you can obviously tell by the title. Yeah, it's not been a good time for me, but you know. I did a blind date with a book with my friend when we were in Toronto together, and the book that I ended up getting is The Christmas Cookie Wars by Eliza Evans. And this is, think like Hallmark, warm and fuzzy cozy. I wouldn't really say it's an adult romance. The spice is very like, very, very tame. The most you get is holding hands and like occasional a couple of kisses and stuff. So this is definitely a good read for young adults, teens, adults, everybody of the like. And it's fun. It's basically about a mom who doesn't want her twin boys to lose the magic of Christmas. And so the town always has this kind of like Christmas cookie fundraising event that the proceeds go towards like the school and the classes and stuff. And this year it's going to get canceled, and she does not want that to happen because she doesn't want her kids to lose the magic of Christmas. And so she ends up becoming the leader of this like Christmas cookie committee, but she can't bake for the life of her. But the really hot principal can, and there ends up being this kind of bet between them and like her kids and stuff that she's gonna make better cookies than him. And him, who's like really good at baking, his grandma taught him how to make the best cookies ever, is like, oh yeah? Okay, let's see. And so they have like this Christmas cookie bacon war, and as you can expect, they end up getting to know each other a little bit better and get a little bit closer. And for me, what was really surprising about this book is a lot about the themes of letting your kids grow up and not holding so tightly on the past, and that people do have to become more independent, even if it's going to be hard and painful and you just don't want them to. And that's like a really big theme in this book, because our main character, Melody, her husband passed away 6 years ago. So she's pretty much just been raising these boys without like a father. And like she has her friends and her family who help them, but she's really scared because a lot of the Christmas traditions she doesn't want to let go because it relates to her husband who had passed. And so when her kids don't want to do certain things because they're carving their own paths, she gets really freaked out about it, because obviously she doesn't want to forget her husband, but she also doesn't want to like restrict her kids and stuff. And so Honestly, that's the part of the book that I think was really, really well done and really surprising. And so I think I ended up giving this either 3.5 or 4 stars. I was really pleasantly surprised with it. It was a good time. And last but certainly not least, we have The Serpent and the Winds of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This book was honestly a disappointment for me. I think I gave it 3 stars, but it was teetering between 2.5 and 3 stars, and the only reason it got up to 3 stars is because the way the ending was set up was really well done. When I talk about this book, it sounds like so awesome that you're probably like, why did you give us a 3 stars? Because like, okay, the premise of this book is really, really promising. It's a world of vampires. Amazing. And our main character, Aurea, is a human who is basically adopted by a vampire. And so she doesn't really see herself as a human or a vampire. She's kind of like in that weird in-between zone. And she has been training to do this kind of like trial that's run by like their goddess, who is like the goddess of all vampires and all of that good stuff. And so she ends up going in there because similarly to Phantasma, she can make a wish that will be granted by this goddess. And there's really great world building. There's different types of vampires, which I thought were really cool. And they have like different winds, and there's a lot of magic, and it's really, really neat, like the universe that's been created. But for me, I did not connect with any of the characters, and I did not get behind the writing of this book. I really wanted to feel for the characters, but I think maybe because the book was just like one POV, but there's so many other like interesting characters, it was hard to kind of get behind because it felt very, I don't even know how to explain it. It just felt really hard to get into Aurea as a character. But like, she has such a cool backstory, and she's like really strong and like all of this stuff, but I don't know, I couldn't get into it, and I think it has to do with the writing of the book. And what I mean by this is, okay, don't get me wrong, the world building and the universe that's created is really, really great. I just found that with the writing, it felt like, let's say you go to a coffee shop and you're talking to your friend who just had this really epic experience, but obviously you know that they were fine because they're telling you about the epic experience that you had. You're not experiencing that epic experience with them. If I'm like, it's so hard to explain. But with this story, it feels like we're not experiencing it with Aurea. It feels like Aurea's already done all of this, and now she's gonna tell us about like her epic journey. So the stakes didn't feel as high. It wasn't as immersive as it could have been. And yeah, that was my main critique with the book. It was just hard. It was so hard to get into. And yeah, but the setup for the ending was really good, because I think that the second book will be way better than the first book because of the way that it's all been set up. So yeah, for whatever reason, I think I am gonna read the second book because I'm curious about, like, it kind of gives like Blood and Ash vibes, and I'm like, you know what, like, I kind of want to know, but I don't know. I didn't like the writing. So yeah, those are all 8 books that I read in the month of December. So it kind of gives you a good idea of the types of books that I enjoy reading. Definitely fantasy, romance, and romantasy. I love all of that kind of stuff with the occasional fiction, horror, whatever kind of I feel like reading. I'm definitely a vibe reader. So if these are the type of books that you enjoy reading, or you are looking for book recommendations, or maybe you just enjoy watching people talk about books, I love to talk about books. So yeah, if any of that applies to you, definitely hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and turn on the bell notification. That way you get notified anytime a new video comes out. If you enjoyed this video and you're a big fan of those book end of month book wrap-ups, definitely hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!